The subject of today's video could become the #1 overall pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. He's the all-time sack leader in Michigan history, the best defensive player in college football in 2021, and was a finalist for the 2021 Heisman Trophy. You're more than likely familiar with him, but Aidan Hutchinson is an absolute monster, and he was born to play for the Michigan Wolverines. In today's video, I want to introduce you to who he is, his journey to get to this point, how good he has been at Michigan, and what is going to happen in the future for him. But before we can talk about that, nearly 80% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel, and I know we can do better than that. Plus, we're on the road to 100K, so quickly be sure to hit that subscribe button, smash that like button for the algorithm, and turn on post notifications so you never miss when I upload. Now, let's get started and talk about the rise of Aidan Hutchinson. In order to understand who Aidan Hutchinson is, we need to go back in time. I mean, really back in time. We had to go all the way back to the 90s when his father, Chris Hutchinson, was an All-American defensive lineman at Michigan. He was a tri-captain as a senior and was the team's MVP recipient. He was also the Big Ten Defensive Lineman of the Year and obviously an All-American. Aidan had big shoes to fill. He loved football from a young age and he was growing into a football player's body. But how did he react to his dad? He said, quote, "I set the bar very high for myself. Obviously, him being an All-American here, I know there's a high standard for me, but I set my own expectations for myself, and I set the bar for myself." Before he became a football star, though, he had one goal in mind. According to his father, about 6 years ago, they went into his bedroom and discovered a prediction. Written in cursive on a blank sheet of paper, his son put on the wall, quote, "I will play football at the University of Michigan." Here's the actual quote his dad said. "One day I was up in his room and he hadn't told me about it, and I saw that taped to his wall there and I thought that was interesting. I walked over to my wife and said, 'Hey honey, did you see what Aidan taped to his wall?' And we both looked at it and said, 'Okay, well if that's what you want, we will help you try to achieve that.'" Every day from then on, his dad would show him his championship rings and how he never lost to Ohio State. But in 8th grade, that would change as Aidan would move all that stuff from his dad's room to his own room, and it would fuel him every single morning. When he was in 8th grade, he only weighed 135 pounds and only weighed 160 pounds as a freshman. But things would change as over the next 2 years, he grew 7 inches and added 70 pounds to his frame. Divine Child was the high school he went to, and they didn't have a freshman team, so JV and varsity practiced together. Apparently, he made an impact and an impression right away. As his high school coach said, quote, "Aidan was a freshman just ruining practice for some of our juniors and seniors, just making life miserable." Aidan would continue to bully people, push himself in training, and grow into his frame, and he became a hot commodity on the recruiting trail. As a senior, he made 65 tackles, and 27 of those were tackles for loss, including 4 sacks. He also played tight end, where he caught 38 passes for 419 yards and 8 touchdowns. He was a two-way star at his high school, the #1 player in the state of Michigan, and was also selected to the U.S. Army All-American game with all the nation's other top players. His coach was concerned for Aidan though when he played in that game. Divine Child was a very small school, having a team of roughly 30 players. The program only played other small schools and not any of the heavyweights in the area. Hutchinson became the first player in that coach's era to play in that game, and he was worried that he would injure himself against the best players from the quote-unquote football factories in Florida and Texas. Inevitably though, Hutchinson was one of the best players in that game and proved everyone wrong. Where would he go though? He did want to see if any other schools would compare, but they didn't, and he committed to Michigan, which was an absolute shocker. He said, quote, "I'm ready to end this recruiting process and focus on this upcoming season, as I am blessed to say that I'll be continuing my academic and athletic career at the University of Michigan." He never considered anywhere else, as he said it was always in his backyard, a home away from home, and he loved living close to there. According to 24/7 Sports, Hutchinson was a 4-star recruit, #6 defensive end, and the 112th best player in the class of 2018. He was good, and he had some pretty lofty goals for himself. Here's what they were. He said, quote, "When I write down my goals every year, I shoot for the absolute highest. They are private, but if you think of the highest accolades in college football, those are my goals. First team All-Big Ten selection, first team All-American selection, and becoming the 2nd defensive player to win the Heisman." He would get pretty dang close, but there would be a lot of time for him in a Michigan uniform before that would happen. One last thing I want to note before we get into his Michigan career is that his quarterback was actually Theo Day, who went on to play for Michigan State for a couple of years. When he got to Michigan, Aidan got hype right away, and it really took off when Lawrence Marshall told the media this, quote, "That kid is going to be an All-American here. Let me slow down a little bit, but he will be an All-American by the time he's finished. He's strong, he goes hard, he's smart, and he really understands football. Marshall wasn't the only guy to give him high praise, as the nation's former #1 overall recruit, Rashawn Gary, also knew he would be special. He said, quote, "I tell him all the time that he's ahead of where I was his freshman year. I am giving him a little bit of confidence, but he also needs to know he has to improve." As a freshman in 2018, Hutchinson would register 12 total tackles and no sacks. He started to play towards the end of the year, and you could obviously tell all the potential was there. He would start to realize a lot of that in 2019. He became a starter, and he registered 68 tackles and 4.5 sacks. To go along with that, he also had 2 forced fumbles. In 2020, his numbers would dip tremendously because of everything going on, but he was still seen as an NFL draft pick. He probably would have been a day 2 or day 3 selection, but he decided he would come back for one more year in a Michigan uniform. He said, quote, "Last year's 2-4 record wasn't very Michigan-like. I want to come back and reset the culture here and get back to our winning ways." Winning is exactly what Hutchinson would do in 2021. He'd register a sack and a forced fumble in their Week 1 win over Western Michigan, and then a career-high 2.5 sacks against Washington. In his first 4 games, he had combined for 5.5 sacks, and the Wolverines were 5-0 after a win over Wisconsin. They narrowly survived a road matchup against Nebraska. He had half a sack against Northwestern, and then they'd be going into one of their biggest games against number 8 Michigan State. Led by Kenneth Walker and Mel Tucker, the Spartans had rose up out of nowhere and were ranked number 8 in the country. Michigan controlled most of this game, and Hutchinson even forced a fumble, but that was very controversial, taken off the board, and Michigan State would eventually win 37-33. Despite the letdown, Aidan would not quit, as he would have 3 sacks 2 weeks later in a huge win over Penn State, and then after a win over Maryland, they were 1 win away from the Big Ten championship and a potential spot in the college football playoff. They would have to get through Ohio State, though, and that was going to be difficult. Going into that Ohio State game, Hutchinson had this to say, quote, "I think we've silenced the critics for the most part. We have this one final test against Ohio State. This is a team that we simply haven't beaten in many years. It's something that we have to get over, and it starts on Saturday. Hopefully, we will go out there and get the win and break that streak." That is what would happen. The game was in Ann Arbor, and snow was falling, and it was one of the most picturesque football games you could imagine, and Michigan took control early. Hutchinson finished with 7 tackles and 3 sacks as he absolutely dominated the Ohio State offensive line and led his team to victory. They pulled off one of the biggest wins in school history and clinched a spot in the Big Ten championship. This was a moment Aidan had dreamed about for years. He said, quote, "I visualized fans storming the field, goalposts coming down, all of that. We did it. It was something I've been thinking about for years now." Aidan was an incredible player, and now they're going to go to the Big Ten championship, where if they beat Iowa, they would go to the playoff. Once again, Hutchinson would have a great game as he got pressure all night long and finished with a sack and a 42-3 blowout win over the number 13 Hawkeyes. Because of that, Michigan ended up going 12-1 in the regular season, and they have now clinched a spot in the college football playoff where they will play against Georgia. But before that game could be played, Aidan would have a huge moment. He was selected as a finalist for the 2021 Heisman Trophy, and he would go against C.J. Stroud, Kenny Pickett, and Bryce Young. Unfortunately, no defensive player had won in a very long time, and that likely was not going to change. The award was given to Alabama's Bryce Young, and Aidan came oh so close to winning the award. I have a good feeling that Hutchinson's going to have a great game against Georgia and add on to the incredible numbers he's had while he's at Michigan. In his 4-year career, he's had 151 tackles and 18.5 sacks. He had 14 sacks this year, which broke the single-season record for Michigan, as he went on to become a first-team All-American, the winner of numerous awards, and the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. Now there are rumors that Hutchinson could be the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft, and I think he is the best draft-eligible player. Maybe a quarterback will go number 1 overall, but in terms of pure domination and a guy who's ready for the next level, I think Aidan deserves to go number 1 overall, and at 6'6", he is going to make an impact in the NFL. Whatever he does in the NFL won't matter, as his legacy has already been left on college football. He somehow managed to hit almost every lofty goal he set for himself. He became better than his dad, and will lead Michigan to one of their best and most memorable seasons ever. He was a Heisman Trophy finalist, a college football superstar, and a role model for all players. I'm really excited to watch him in the playoff and in the NFL, and I really hope the best for him. What do you guys think, though? If you're a Michigan fan, what do you think of Aidan Hutchinson? Where do you guys think he will go in the NFL draft, and how good will he be? Also, be sure to let me know a player I could take a look at in my next video. Hit that like button if you want to support today's video. Check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my video about the rise of Kenneth Walker. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.